overview of Dwarf Fortress since you're here. Do this. Zoom out a little bit. Where are your dwarves and how do they look like? Well, they're everywhere. Let's zoom in and show you a dwarf. This is a dwarf. Right here. This is my cursor, the little X. But this little guy right here, this is Vubok. He's a glassmaker, I think. Yeah. And what does he look like? Well, his sideburns are clean shaven, and his very long mustache is neatly combed. His long beard is braided, and his very long hair is tied in a ponytail. He has a square chin, and his nose is slightly upturned. His ears are somewhat splayed out, and his hair is pale. His hair is pale taupe, and his skin is cinnamon, and his eyes are amethyst. Purple eyes. Pretty. This particular dwarf personally sees no value in holding back complaints and concealing emotions, and finds maintaining decorum silly, and a fumbling waste of time. Dreams of crafting a great work of art, like styrite and aluminum, resin, opal, and skink tooth, amber, and four-sided prisms. Hooray, marmot men for their whistles, and the words of the watchful orbs. All of this, this is your character stat sheet, essentially. So every single one of my dwarves, all like 60-ish of them, have a stat sheet. Recent thoughts, feelings, likes and dislikes, family history, family members, deities, gods that they worship. This particular dwarf worships Fathri, the deity of the Cyclopean confederacies, that's the right word, most often takes the form of a male human and is associated with lightning, thunder, storms, rain, agriculture, fertility, and food. First, a bunch of dwarves to be vampires. That's the only known relations we have with that dwarf, because they're secretive. The dwarf is currently wearing silk trousers, a silk dress, a wool robe, pigtail cloak, and a chimpanzee leather cap. Is thirsty and is going to go drink. This dwarf is going to run down to the tavern, or probably the kitchens actually, down way on the bottom levels, and get themselves a drink. So, I'm sure most of you here are familiar with RimWorld, and I'm sure most of you here are probably familiar with Minecraft. I'm just going to zoom out for a second. This is one layer. This is one Z level. This is the beginning of the top level of the fortress. Over on the right, there is a small stream. The map itself is a black sand volcanic desert. All right, we are on the plains just next to a couple necromancer towers, so the undead are plentiful. There are many zombies that come wandering through these parts, which is why we are building ourselves a large wall. The kind of brown areas are areas that have been designated to be dug out, but what you're actually looking at here is a 2D representation of a 3D world. What you're seeing is essentially one layer of Minecraft blocks, or one layer, or one single RimWorld map. Now, if I hold Shift and hit the greater than symbol, I move up a Z level. Now you can see the tops of my walls that I've constructed, as well as the upper floor where my military is training, and the tops of the walls that I'm constructing. If I move up another layer, you can now see things fading off into the distance, hence why they are blue. And we can see kind of the topographical map that is Dwarf Fortress. So that's above ground. You can also see the tips of trees now. If I move a few Z levels back down, you can see the fortress again. The black starry areas are layers of blocks that haven't been dug out now, as you can see up in the top right, because we're one layer below ground. The top right, you can actually see underwater in that little creek. If I were to zoom in on it, you'd see some fish in there, but we're not going to do that. If I move down Z levels, those are my stairs, those little X's in the middle there. This is an opening for an underground cave that we kind of dug right past. As I fly down, you can see more stairs and other areas that have been dug out. Some of these areas have been, and that's because they have veins of ore, which we have completely cleared out. This is the second cavern layer. It's filled with giant mushrooms and various other creatures in an underground lake. The purple stuff that you see sometimes is the stench of rotting flesh. This is the third cavern layer, and that's where I'm putting my poor dead dwarves. And down here is the actual fortress itself. The next thing I'm going to show you is the world map. Okay? Thanks, Epic. This is quite a small world, so I'm going to zoom in. This is the whole world map. Now, it might look like a mess but all of these icons mean things. You might look at this and go, all I see is a whole bunch of whacked out symbols. Sure, that's fine. Up at the top here, this little X, you might see it moving. That's my cursor. This is where my fort is. We're kind of in between these two big ol' lakes, the water of clashing and the adorable water. And we're in the land of glee. The Fed Fang Dunes. Our fortress is the Fortress of Fang Shimmers in the Fed Fang Dunes, in between two towers, operated by necromancers. Now, this is the biggest difference between Dwarf Fortress, RimWorld, and every other Dwarf Fortress, in quotes, like game. Most of them, like let's just say Space Haven or RimWorld, Space Haven just came out. When you generate a world, it gives you a map. There's nothing actually in that map. There might be a few static objects. In the case of Space Haven, there's ships that move around and don't really do much else that you can trade with, and pirates that move around. In RimWorld, there's a bunch of static objects on the map that are like locations where you can go trade with people or kill things. That's about it. And occasionally little events will pop up. This game doesn't do that. So this game, this particular world, this is not vanilla. This is actually a tile set. It's quite graphical. There's quite a lot of stuff that isn't vanilla. Otherwise, you wouldn't have walls. You just have equal symbols. So my tile set's much easier to discern than like vanilla. So when you generate a world in this game, it generates 150, 250, 500, or 1,050 years of history. Now, when I say years of history, I mean hundreds of thousands of individual lives, characters, monsters, creatures, religions, civilizations, books, artifacts, wars, monasteries, tombs, gods, forms of poetry, forms of music, musical instruments, and every single time it's different. You can actually go back, and we were doing this earlier today. We spent like an hour and a half earlier today, literally just reading a different world that I generated this morning's history. Doing nothing but reading its history about different creatures, monsters. We read about some religions and just spent time doing that. So instead of generating a static world, it generates a living, breathing, evolving world that doesn't give a flying fuck about you. Right? RimWorld, it generates a map, gives you a goal, and tries its best to kill you using algorithms. This game generates a world and doesn't care what you do in it. It just operates around you and accidentally squishes you at some point. Another thing that might make things obvious, now I don't know if there's anything actually happening in this world right now. Not currently. So if there was actually there is some news. In the late summer of the year 560, Logrim Mirror Shades became the sacred deep of the domination of knights, replacing Thloltig Abercoven. Okay, so there was a rebalancing of power here, but that's like the only real news that's going on. There's something else that happened up here. In the mid-autumn of 559, Tubal Handelgrounds became the sacred scar of the Order of Knighting. All right, replacing somebody else. Sure, that's kind of irrelevant to us. But here's another thing that Dwarf Fortress does that nothing else really does. Once again, this is, wait, actually, where was my fortress? This is our fortress currently. If I go, where was it? Was it this one? There it is. The Ale Harvest of Scorching. Population 600, some artifacts. Site government, the Terror of Bile. Civilization, the Cloudy Dungeons. That is a previous fortress that we played on. We played in it for about 10 years in-game time. We had a whole lot of dwarves in there. Oh, absolutely, you can get strong enough to crush the world, but that's maybe the least interesting thing you can do in Dwarf Fortress. Oh, RimWorld is way harder, but I enjoy playing Dwarf Fortress a hell of a lot. Dwarf Fortress can be fucking hard, though, if you decide to make it hard. Dwarf Fortress can also be extremely easy if you decide to make it easy. I would say RimWorld is mean. Dwarf Fortress can be hard, but RimWorld is just mean. But difficulty doesn't necessarily make a game good. Anyway, that's my brief introduction to Dwarf Fortress. Any questions? As far as dwarves themselves, dwarves are designated by their color. Their highest skill is the color that they are, but it might not currently be the job that they are doing. They all have different names. This is the list of my dwarves and what they're doing. Another thing I should say. This game doesn't have an HP system. A lot of games have HP systems, which is just like a static number that as you hit them, damage goes down. Maybe they'll have different limbs. This game keeps track of, bear with me here, bones, blood, muscles, tendons, fat, skin, organs, eyelids, tongues, fingers, toenails, digestive systems, and if they actually bleed out, and if they run out of blood, they die. Teeth, yes. Installing is not a hassle at all. It's literally download the game, extract the zip file. If you want a tile set, go into the graphics or the graphics file, drag and drop the tile set you want, go to D-Init and scroll down to tile set, change the default to the name of the tile set, and then change your resolution and turn off music. Done. It's not a hassle. I could get a new install of Dwarf Fortress up in 3 minutes. What tile set are you trying to use? It's like 30 PNG files? Use a different tile set then. Oh, yeah, then you want to use Lazy Noob Pack. If you're using like a proper graphical one, you just use a launcher. I don't recommend that though. But, you know, I also like more vanilla tile sets. Yeah, but also gives you a lot of bugs.